have to bear with me. This is the first time I have ever preached, or shared anything. So this is a new experience. I have everything written down, so it may seem like I'm just talking at you, but I'm not. Well, I am, but I struggled with a title for this. It was going to be why, how, but in the end I ended up with just questions. The title of my message is questions. Have you ever been in situations where all you do is question God? God, why me? Why now? Why does it have to be like this? Why don't you do things quicker, God? Why haven't you answered my prayers? What do I do now? How do I fix it? Where do I go from here? Personally, I have questioned God so many times. And I'll try and share a bit of part of my story a bit later on. That's my message. No, carry on. And I also believe when we read through the Bibles, we can see the many times that people have questioned God in their situations, in what was happening. And when I read them, I can hear them, even though sometimes they're not written down. I can hear the questions. From Noah in the ark to Moses and his situation, and then to Joshua and the walls of Jericho. Now, the walls of Jericho, God told him exactly what to do in regards to walking around the city and what to do on that seventh day. And now that seventh day would be totally different from the other 6. Now, I can imagine Joshua going, God, are you sure? How's that going to work? God, really? But God told him. God had a plan, God had a process, and God knew exactly what would happen. But who could imagine a city wall falling just from a trumpet sound and a victory cry? But you know what? Joshua trusted God, and he followed through. And in Joshua 6:1-7, I'm going to read the passages. And it says, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the walls of the city will collapse and the army will go up. Everyone will go straight in. So Joshua called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have the 7 priests carry trumpets in front, and he ordered the army advance, march around the city with the armed guard, going ahead of the ark of the Lord. Now, I can imagine the army going, Joshua, what? Really? How's that going to work? And the looks, you can imagine, we all do it, don't we? We all pull the looks But they followed through. And they trusted. And they did exactly as God had told them. And on the 7th day, this is Joshua 6:15-7. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except on that day they circled the city 7 times, not once, 7. And on the 7th time, the priest sounded the trumpet, and Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord, and only Rahab and all who are in her house will be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in and took the city. Joshua, the priests, and the army trusted, and the city was delivered. They followed God's plan exactly. They didn't divert, they followed his plan. Now, one of the other biggest questions that I always come back to in the Bible was actually from Jesus when he was on the cross. Now, he knew he'd come to earth for a plan, for a purpose of dying on the cross, to be a sacrifice for us. Yet towards the end, he still questioned God. And that question, from Matthew 27:43 to 46, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And then he cried out again, and in a loud voice, and then he gave up his spirit. But God never left Jesus. He never left him at all. He was there the whole time. He had to complete a work that he had started. Now, again, God could have defeated the cross immediately. Jesus probably didn't have to die, could have just done what he needed to do. But he had a plan, and that was part of it. And part of that was Jesus died for 3 days. And I feel the reason it was 3 days because it truly showed that he'd actually died. If you read back and look at some of the Jewish side of things, 3 days, they believed you're truly dead. And then they couldn't question him rising again. Now my 3 points. This hopefully will all make sense. Time. Everything is in God's timing, and his timing is perfect. Just like as we read, around the walls of Jericho would need 7 days. God could have flattened the walls with a breath of wind, with a little push. But the timing had to be right because there was a process. And just like in our lives, God's timing is perfect. Now, we may not feel it is. We may question it. God, really? Come on, speed up. Hurry up. No, God, just slow it down a little bit. This is going too quick. But every moment in our lives is happening at the right time. And every moment that we experience leads us to where we are now. Now, like I said, it's not easy. There are times when we feel things are happening too soon, taking too long, but we do have to be patient. And we have to trust that God has everything in control and his timing is right. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and to pick them up, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Oh, yeah, don't hug. There's always a time. A time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. God already knows the times of what's going to happen in our lives. He knew us before we were even planned. He knew us before we were even conceived. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before even one of them came to pass. So God's timing for your life is exactly right. Your purpose for now, your timing now is exactly right. And I look back at my own personal journey where God's timing has been perfect and I've questioned it. And, sometimes you don't get all the answers. And it's okay to question. But God's timing is just right. Point 2, surrender. We should and need to surrender to God and allow him to speak to us and take control. One of the phrases that was told to me when I was a lot younger was let go and let God. If we surrender and allow God to take control, put the situations we find ourselves in and the questions that we have into his hand, we can then allow him to answer. We can allow him to move. And you know what? He He probably will answer. It might not be the answer that you want. But if we surrender and lay it down, then, we give him that opportunity. Peter 5:6, humble yourselves therefore under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety onto him, because he cares for you. Proverbs 6:3, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. The Lord works out everything to its proper end. And then Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. We can find we tie ourselves up with questions, but we do have to allow ourselves to lay them down and allow God to move. Surrendering is hard, and it's not a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We have to continually do it. Every new situation, every place we find ourselves in. We could do life on our own. We could do it in our own strength, in our own time. Would it be easier? From my experience, I don't think so. It's always easier with God. Point 3. Trust the process. We need to trust that God has everything in control, and that it's part of his plan for our lives. And again, it's not easy giving up that control. But we have to have faith that God is in control and that he wouldn't give us more than we can bear. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Every step we take on our journey of our life with God in our faith, again, is leading to the moment where we are now. We see it time and time again in all the Bible stories that we read, that God had everything under control. Romans 8:28, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called to his purpose. Hebrews 11:1, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Hebrews 11:7, by faith Noah, when warned about things yet not seen, in holy fear, built the ark to save his family. Hebrews 11:23, by faith Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw that he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's law. And 11:30, by faith the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. If we look back at the story of the walls of Jericho, it didn't start with the marching around the walls. The process started so many years, time before. He sent out spies. They crossed the Jordan. They had Rahab in place, who hid the spies. So God always has a plan, and he doesn't give us more than we can bear. We don't have to do it on our own. We don't have to do it in our own strength. And I said I'd share a time when I questioned God a lot. And that time was when I lost my dad. I was 20 years old. He went to bed and he never woke up. And we found him in the morning. Now I question God an awful lot. You can imagine, why him? He was a godly man. Why? Why us as a family? Why now? I'm so young. I need my dad. What do I do? How will we survive without him? God didn't hit me with all the answers to my questions, and there are still unanswered questions now. But the one thing I know, God knew what he was doing. I can look back and see the process, how things had changed over the years, and how actually Dad may not have handled it very well. How us as a family have progressed in our journeys. But I keep hold of one particular thing that God showed me afterwards. Dad always slept in. I'd get up and go to work, and he'd still be in bed. But the week before he passed away, he decided he was going to get up and read his Bible every morning. So every morning I got up for work and he was sat at the breakfast table. And I had 5 mornings where I had breakfast with him, where I got to talk to him. And we prayed before I left for work. And then on the evening of that 5th day, he passed away. Now, I didn't take that at first. I was like, it's just life, isn't it? But God showed me that he gave me something special. And he knew what he was doing. And I can look back and see that precious time had actually led me in a way to where I am now. Because as hard as it is when you lose something to somebody or as part of the process, I actually wouldn't have met my husband. I then wouldn't have had my child. And I wouldn't be stood here today. And I still have to trust that process. Because my journey's not finished. No matter what's going on in our lives, our journeys aren't finished. As hard as life can seem, we still have to trust. So I guess my thing here says wrap it up. It's okay to question God. God doesn't get cross when we question him. It's like every child parent. Can you imagine it? Mum, why? Mum, please, no. Can I have that now? Why not? How does that work? The amount of times I've heard why. Are we nearly there yet? But it's like a child-parent relationship. It shows we're ready to communicate with him. But like all relationships, when we're asking questions, we need to stop and we need to listen for the answer. We need to surrender our own thoughts, our own plans, and allow him to speak. And sometimes it may not feel that, sometimes it may feel that God is far away, or maybe he's not there. But you have to have faith. He said that he would never leave us or forsake us. We just have to give it time. Allow him to speak and trust him. Deuteronomy 31:8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Now, I read in a Christian author book, and the phrase stuck out because it spoke to me. Even if it seems God is ignoring us, he's listening. And when the time is right, his time, not ours, he offers the guidance and the answers that we need. So trust in his process, in his time. We don't have to rush. We don't have to do it on our own. We can allow him to lead, allow him to speak, and allow him to do what is right. It's not easy, but let go of control, because his way is much easier than ours. So let go and let God. Now, if there's anybody that feels they want prayer, if there's something that you're holding on to that you feel that you need to allow God to come in and speak. If you're trying to do things on your own, now's the time to allow God to just come and speak to you. If you're in a situation that you're struggling with and you've got lots of questions, we'd love to pray for you this morning. Or, if you don't want to put your hand up, or, come and grab one of us at the end. There's Ida, there's myself, there's Annie, there's Ollie. Life can be tough. I get that. We all go through it. But it's in his time. Lay it down and trust him.